Hello everyone, as I'm sure you know, today is Women's International Day, so I decided to take two sexy characters from two amazing series and force them to fight to the death on my channel. The sexy queen from 2B Era X is one of the contenders, as well as the sexy Ubel from Frieren. Now, both of these characters are actually more similar than people think, especially when you consider the weapon of choice they use, as well as their hacks abilities. Now, this is going to be a different video, as after I explain both of the characters, I'm going to go over stats like striking strength, combat speed, stuff like that, to explain which character I believe takes it and why. I also want to mention before I get into the power scaling that this is going to be using anime only for Ubel, so you don't have to worry about any manga spoilers. Now I'm going to start off with my favorite character from 2B Era X, Queen, as I believe she's sexy by the way. But yes, anyways, getting into her scaling. She's actually one of the more stronger characters in the entire series, with only the actual X of the series being able to beat her. There's also other characters, but we're not going to talk about them. When it comes to her physical prowess, she's actually amazing, considering her fight with Boa, and she actually has one of the flashiest feats in the entire series up to this point. Her literally appearing and using her ability was able to stop 4 characters who should be top tier in the entire verse, and she did this pretty easily, with the only character able to move being Big Johnny, and Big Johnny's in a tier all by himself, and he was still having trouble. Her ability is basically her forcing a rule or law in a domain in which her opponent and herself are in, and with this she can basically manipulate the laws of physics, allowing her to either control how her opponents move, immobilizing them completely, or allowing her to do crazy things like fly. She can also launch off massive ass key attacks, kind of like what I showed earlier. It's almost like she's from Dragon Ball Z. When it comes to speed, she should be faster in E-Soul, and E-Soul is capable of pulling out natural lightning, which is pretty insane. Even the new E-Soul, when using his lightning to amp his travel speed, wasn't fast enough to escape the range of her domain. There wasn't really much to talk about for Queen, so I'm just gonna move on again to Ubel. Ubel isn't really complicated either. She basically uses slashing magic within a 5-meter radius, and due to how magic in Frieren works, it's basically where if you can imagine yourself being able to do something, then it is possible. In other words, let's say we have Sense, using all types of spells to fortify her hair and whatnot. Ubel with her magic can literally just ignore that, as long as she can perfectly visualize her being able to cut it. And this is also what she did to another first class mage, who actually had the ultimate defense, something that even Sense thought was impossible to pierce with attack magic, and she just cut him in half completely. In other words, Ubel, as long as the conditions are right, can straight up win against people far more powerful than her. Though she did admit that she was indeed weaker than Sense, as she admitted that Denkin and Werble were stronger than her, and Denkin admitted that Sense was most likely going to whoop his ass if he went to go fight her clone. In other words, Ubel basically has some crazy-ass durability negation. What's more, she can use all types of basic magic and can defend herself as long as the attack doesn't have an insane amount of mass, which honestly is going to be useless in this fucking fight, let's be real. For speed, it's more complicated than what we have for Queen, as there is a couple of metas we can use. There's obviously the Stillate that's moving faster in sound, and that one, I don't really think that's really fair to use, because all the characters that were having trouble catch it really can't travel at that speed. Whereas for combat and reaction speed, you can mention the fact that magic and Frieren usually takes mana and manipulates natural elements. What that means is basically if you're using lightning or light magic, you can argue that those are actually using the natural elements of lightning and light. The real issue though is that she doesn't really scale to the characters who use that, though she is a speed type fighter. You could probably argue she's anywhere between massively hypersonic as well as relativistic to the speed of light. I'll leave that up to you though. When it comes to her own hacks abilities outside of the bringing up shields as well as the slashing magic and basic magic spells, she actually used things like Soaring Gale, I hope I said that right, to essentially restrict your movement similar to what Queen does. Though the issue with that is she needs to keep your entire body within sight, otherwise it's not going to work. This will also make it hard to actually kill somebody, though she probably could just use a basic spell and blow your head off. Now to go over the categories and who I think takes what, when it comes to striking strength, I have to side with Queen here. Queen just has way better feats in that category. And when it comes to lifting strength, Ubel doesn't really have much for that, but Queen trains a lot, so I wouldn't be surprised if she lifts weights. For combat speed, I would actually have to side with Ubel, as there's better arguments for her when it comes to the potential relativistic to the speed of light stuff, so I would have to give that to her. Though I do think that Queen should be in that tier as well, arguably, due to the fact that she should just outright outscale Isol at this point, and we actually see he got completely blitzed by her domain, so yeah. When it comes to reaction speed, I would still side with Ubel, though I would actually give travel speed to Queen due to the fact that she can actually fly when manipulating physics in her domain. When it comes to blunt durability and piercing durability, I also have to side with Queen, as she showed some pretty insane feats for that when she was fighting Boa. When it comes to Hack's abilities, I actually think this is the closest one, but I would have to give this to Queen, as her domain not only has a better range than her slashing attacks, but she doesn't have the condition of needing her opponent's entire body in view. Though if she gets caught by Ubel using that, it's kinda over. When it comes to attack potency, I would actually have to favor Ubel, because she can just straight up negate Queen's durability. Ubel's literally cut people in half that should have outright better durability than Queen based off the fact that they have insane magical resistances. Though I would have to give destructive capacity to Queen as well. Anyways, everybody, when it comes to who I actually believe wins, I think it really depends. If Queen uses her ability early, then she'll probably just stop Ubel and just win that way, as Ubel really doesn't have a resistance to this type of attacks as shown when she was fighting Werbel. Though, if Ubel manages to keep her distance and traps her with Soaring Gale first, then she just outright wins. Though Ubel prefers to not fight like that, so that might bite her in the ass. Truth be told, I actually think this fight could go either way, because with Queen and her little domain ability, she can basically just trap Ubel that way, and she has better range, she's stronger than Ubel, has better durability, but honestly, in my opinion, a lot of these things don't matter, because the speed gap is just honestly too big. Unless Queen flies up and gets an advantage that way, Ubel's just gonna cut her in half. But Queen would have to be pretty quick in doing that, and the chances of Ubel just either blitzing her or potentially even just trapping her with Soaring Gale is a really hard argument to get by if you want to argue Queen winning. I actually don't think Ubel would really use Soaring Gale, as I believe Queen would most likely use her ability before that, but the chances of Queen just getting blitzed is just it's too hard to argue against that, in my opinion. So if I were forced to pick a winner between these two, I would actually have to side with Ubel, though I do think that if you want to argue Queen winning, that is also a very valid argument, as the speed gap is not insanely big, but I just believe that Ubel coming up close and trying to use her slashing based attacks, Queen is not going to know how dangerous those are unless we give her knowledge, and if we give them both knowledge, then Queen is auto losing because Ubel is just going to look at her and activate Soaring Gale that way, and then she's just going to use something like Zoltrak and blow her head off. And that is how I feel this fight would go, and I do believe that Ubel would be the overall winner. Though if it came to the Battle of the Mods, I would actually have to side with my Queen. There's going to be more videos like this in the future, and honestly, I'm going to set up another video for the next holiday ahead of time. If any of you would be interested in more videos, don't forget to like and subscribe, and here's a spreadsheet if you ever want to buy a video. And if you have a suggestion for something I could read or watch, just put it down in the comments. I actually had a lot of fun making this video. Hopefully I'll have fun making the next one. Peace, everybody.